A little while ago, someone commented and asked me how I normally start off a playthrough in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. And then I thought to myself, well, of course, in the tutorial. No, but for real, I thought about it and honestly wasn't sure. I feel like my playstyle, motives, and ambitions have changed so much in this game ever since I started making content for it. I'm practically making new characters every week in Oblivion, building a god in Morrowind, and still working on things in Skyrim. After doing pretty much every quest in this game, it's hard to think about what comes next. Either way, this video was on my to-do list, and then bam, the remake drops. It's the same game, yet completely different, at least for me. However, this means it's the perfect opportunity. I have no long-standing characters, no ideas for builds, and I still need to explore this version of Cyrodiil. So, what better way to show you my humble beginnings than by doing it in the 2025 remaster? Now, in order to spice things up, I thought I'd start by showing you how I would have started things way back when, like the first time I ever played the game. I'll go through my build, what my first moves were out of the tutorial section, what I focused on, what quests I did, etc. Then I'll flip over to my current day playthrough, what I want to get out of the game, where I'd go, what I would do, etc. Before we get into it, I'd love to know down below what your current build is in Oblivion Remastered and what you're hoping to get out of your experience. Whether it's nostalgia, a whole new sense of adventure, challenge runs, new takes on stories, whatever it may be. So let's begin with my old style of play. Now back then, there really wasn't much in the way of wikis, walkthroughs, or guides on the internet. Well, maybe there were, but I probably didn't know it at the time. I'm saying this because I didn't know how to properly build a character, if such a thing even exists, and I didn't look at any forums or builds online. In fact, to this day, there's some of you out there who might still say I don't know how to make a proper class, and to that I say, true. Of course, the very first thing you do in the game is customize your character. For this area, I never took race into account and how it would affect my starting stats. An orc who prioritized magic? No problem. A wood elf barbarian? You got it. I usually just picked any old person. In this case, I went with a dark elf. Don't even get me started with how overlooked my character's origin would have been if that was a thing in the original. Wouldn't have cared at all. Also, huge shout out to everyone who showed me how to see the different starting stats based around your character's origin. This one's for you. From there, an absolute must was to max out the sliders. I'm talking about a creation that rivals someone like Sloth from the Goonies. My friends and I used to get together and hold competitions for how contorted and monstrous we can make our characters look. You probably wouldn't guess it from my amateur work here, but that crown still sits on my head. Once wrapped up, I was pretty much on autopilot mode. The initial tutorial area is a freebie. You can do whatever you'd like, and it wouldn't have a lasting impact on your character at all. Unless of course you somehow find a way to max out your skills. So, similar to today, I would have just wiped out any enemies in my path, looted the most obvious and shiny looking treasures, and then rushed along to my birth sign. I think too, once you've done the starting area so many times, you kind of just tune everything out until you get to the sewer tunnel. There's actually a lot in here though that could help just about any class and character type get started. Like for example, there's a whole novice alchemy set in the second zone, which I don't think I've ever touched more than once, and when I did, it was for money. Actually, one thing I should mention though is that the rusty iron armor was picked up almost every single time. I was a heavy armor or die kind of kid, and until I could get the steel upgrade, this gear type was glued to my body. As for the other items down here, easily replaceable. The rusty armor though, one of a kind. Absolutely needed until level 5, no exceptions. Moving along, for birth sign, I distinctly remember the first one I ever picked being the Shadow. I think that sweet promise of invisibility for 60 seconds blew my mind at the time, and guess what? I think I only ended up using it maybe 3 or 4 times. If it wasn't the Shadow, then it was the Serpent. The ability to cure poison, damage health, damage fatigue, and dispel was equally as enticing to me. Guess how many times I would have cast that. To be honest, I haven't done enough research, nor am I smart enough to know why people wouldn't pick a birth sign that gives constant buffs. Maybe for roleplay or to have specific powers, but I've always felt like a crafted spell can just as easily make up the difference. That's just me though. In any case, on to the final portion of the tutorial, picking a class. I almost always, 9 times out of 10, made the exact same class. It was a cycle between customizing a character, getting bored, and then trying a specific role, like mage, archer, etc. Feeling too limited, I would then go back to making a custom class. Maybe sometimes one of the major skills would have been switched around, but otherwise, here it is. Specialty combat, attributes strength and endurance. Major skills, armor, athletics, blade, block, destruction, heavy armor, and restoration. That was pretty much always the build. If you're keen and have watched my other videos, you'll note that my Nord Knight, the character who went through all of the factions, main questline, and DLCs, was pretty much this build. I don't think it's a bad class, I just think it's as vanilla gets. The jack of all trades, master of none. As soon as the tutorial area was done, I was off to the exterior of Vilverin, another habit that hasn't changed much today. Now, let's talk about my skill choices. Blade for offense. I never picked blunt, and archery was only ever used to pull enemies away from packs. In this case, that's why I picked destruction. Flare would just about be the only spell I'd learn, and it was to start the fight off or pull aggro. For defense, it would only ever be heavy armor. Higher armor rating and cooler looking pieces. The slower movement speed and heavier gear never really bothered me. Armorer was to repair everything, and that's something that I think I actually got right at the time. Block wasn't a horrible choice either. It was to add to my already beefy defense. The issue is that in most battles, I swung for the fences. The more you swing, the faster your enemy dies. The more you block, the slower. Restoration was used for self-efficiency. Potions weren't always easy to come by, and since my character wasn't magicka dependent, most of it would be dedicated to self-healing. Finally, for athletics, well, I couldn't really tell you. I think the promise of increased movement speed was enticing, and maybe it was to counteract all of my cumbersome choices, but again, I'm honestly not sure. Maybe I didn't feel like I needed to pick anything else. Another form of offense was a distraction for leveling blade. I didn't need any of the stealth skills because I was never that stealthy. Maybe lockpicking might have been chosen once or twice, but I doubt more than that. To be honest, I think it's a build that still works and can get you pretty far in the game. Why I did it was because I hated feeling like I was stuck to a specific role or combat type, which is kind of ironic. But because I changed characters so much, it was old reliable to come back to. Now, I've discussed it before, but my all-time favorite quest in Oblivion is Unfriendly Competition. It carries the most nostalgia for me, and is the first one I'd always embark on right after leaving the prison. A scandalous plot in the safety of the Imperial City. You have sneaking, lockpicking, and confrontation. Following that are decent beginner weapons, Debaser, and Caliban's Grim Retort. There's something for everyone. Plus, there are a handful of Lord of the Rings references, so you can't go wrong. In my previous video, I said that after playing for a couple of hours, the novelty was fading quickly for Oblivion Remastered. And it's true, after wandering through Cyrodiil, doing a bit of exploration, I felt like my excitement was calmed. Was this it? Did I get everything I wanted out of it already? One of my favorite games ever got a remake, and I'm already over it. Well, I can honestly say that after doing Unfriendly Competition, I was pulled back in. I am now head over heels for this game, and it was all due to Thornir.
Thank you. It's not only a fine assortment of goods, but a bit of a treasure trove. You never know what I'll have in stock.
Thornir has a new voice actor. The old, goofy, arrogant Thornir was gone, and a new one took his place. One of the key components from my all-time favorite quests was replaced. I think through this, I was able to mentally digest that the plot is still Oblivion, but the rest of the game is so different. To me, it's nothing like the original. It's the Uncanny Valley inside a game that was known for being the Uncanny Valley. Each NPC, every brick and plank of wood, the way the light hits the world, it's completely different. I know I probably sound redundant, but that's exactly how it hit me. To me, the world seems cozier and more inviting. The environment is friendlier, yet there are a lot of unforgiving elements still. I feel like I want to explore everything all over again, a feeling that I never had in the original Oblivion. Trust me, I 100% understand the other side of the coin though, and while I was able to embrace the remake, a lot of people are still struggling with it, and I feel for you. It really isn't for everyone. It's made in Bethesda's modern game style, and the gameplay has been made easier. Hopefully Bethesda and Virtuous can figure out a way to please everybody with patches and updates, but who knows if that'll actually happen. Anyways, apart from unfriendly competition, I might have done the odd side quest here and there, but that was about it. Once unfriendly competition was done, it was time to artificially inflate my skills. Original console players will remember the trick of rubber banding your joystick and having your character continuously walk into a wall. At least that's how I did it. There were a few different ways to skin the cat, as they say. I used to sneak into a residence in the Imperial City, crouch upstairs, and bash my knees into the wall over and over again. It worked like a charm, and in 1 to 1.5 hours tops, level 100 sneak was achieved. In the remake, they cleverly removed your character's ability to infinitely walk into obstructions. So without it, there's no way to keep their body in motion, thus inflating your sneak skill. I saw a trick online though where someone moved both joysticks in the same direction, allowing your character to essentially sneak in circles. It worked, but I won't show much of it because it made me sick just looking at it for 5 seconds. Why I wanted to max out sneak when my character never really used stealth, I don't know. I'm assuming it was to help increase my overall level, and speaking of which, that leads me into my next point. I wanted nothing more than to be a high level. I wanted nice gear, more challenging enemies, and better quest rewards. Could I actually handle the enemy portion? Not really, especially with the way I chose to level. Almost everyone knows that leveling is a process best done practically. You're really only shooting yourself in the foot if you use exploits like this on the regular, and especially if you're doing it for your major skills, like I used to. One of the best, if not the best, makeshift training ground in Oblivion is Peryite Shrine. Upon first discovery, all of the NPC worshippers will be frozen on the spot. They're unresponsive, can't interact back with you, and best of all, there's no penalty for assaulting them. I used to spend hours here training skills like hand-to-hand, blade, and destruction. If I felt like it, blunt would be worked on too, solely to help the leveling process. Your character is pretty isolated from any threats and can realistically hang around the shrine for as long as you'd like. One of the biggest issues with this, of course, is that while your offensive skills get a boost, your defensive ones are left in the dust. Blade can go to level 70, bringing you to level 7, but heavy armor will stay at around 35 to 40, making you the squishiest tank on Nern. A fun exploit, but not one I'd recommend anymore. The last thing I would do in my old playthroughs is start, but not finish, almost all of the major quest lines. These were usually the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Arena, and main storyline. I hardly messed around with the Dark Brotherhood, and I never really touched the Thieves Guild. I hated committing crimes in the game and having them be canon to my playthrough. If I was going to do something bad, I'd save, slaughter an entire town, and then revert back. It would be enough to satisfy my curiosity, but I guess casual crimes just felt like too much for me at the time. Of course, that creates a barrier to entry, but I also think it had to do with the stealth aspect of both factions. I didn't like sneaking. I know, ironic to get the skill to level 100, and I also didn't know that there were more direct approaches for both questlines. That's also why I enjoyed the ones that I actually embarked on though. The arena is straight to the point, a fight to the death with a single opponent most of the time. After the battle, you heal and redo it all over again. Then you get rewarded for your efforts. The Fighters Guild was always an interesting one. Maybe I'd make it to some of Modron Orien's later quests, but usually around then I'd lose interest. Most of the time for the Mages Guild, I was able to get access to the Arcane University, but I believe I only ever beat the story 2 times. Now, as for the main storyline, those Oblivion gates used to scare the heck out of me. Staring down into the fiery pits of hell, crusading through the Deadlands alone, getting jumped by Scamps, Clanfear, and Dremora, nightmare fuel for young me. On average, Kvatch was my stopping point. If I made it past the destroyed city, then at most, Mehrunes Dagon Shrine would be my finish line. Fun fact, up until maybe 2021, I hadn't seen the endings for a lot of these storylines. I was usually obsessed with adventuring through the wilderness, discovering new secrets, eradicating a whole town, or worming my way through people's private property. Overall, I was a very cowardly crusader. I frequently liked to try new builds, but I didn't know how to properly play through them. So, that deterred me from continuing forward. Now, let's flip the script and go through my modern day process. As I said in the beginning, it's a little hard to visualize what I want out of the game, because I've experienced so much of it through this channel. I've gone through every single quest, each DLC, and am still playing around with challenge builds. However, the beautiful part of the remake is that it's reignited my passion for exploring. I want to delve into dungeons, fight enemies, and work on quests that I've only really done a handful of times. If anything, I want the opposite experience of what I went through while playing as a youngster. So here's my build. I decided that I wanted to go for a stealthy playthrough. I feel like I now have the patience and willpower to slowly and methodically crawl through those dungeons. Steamrolling and announcing my presence doesn't really interest me anymore. So, looking at the stats, I chose a Khajiit from Anakinna. They get a plus 10 increase to sneak and buffs to both strength and agility. Meanwhile, willpower and endurance get nerfed. Why Khajiit? Well, not only for the superior stealth stats, but because it's a race that I haven't really touched in a long time. As for whether or not my character was going to be looks maxing, I decided to just make him blue and go on my way. He's distinct enough without getting all crazy. Now comes the birth sign. For my needs, the Thief's bonus 10 points to agility, luck, and speed feel like the most appropriate. There really isn't anything else that I want out of here anyways. Then lastly, there's class. I decided to take a peek at some of the pre-made ones in order to see if anything fit the bill right away. Assassin came really close to what I wanted. I didn't want alchemy or blade in there though. So creating a custom class, I pretty much mirrored everything else and replaced those two with blunt and mercantile. Like before, my first move was to set off for Vilverin, sweeping through both the exterior and the interior, testing my skills and amassing loot. I picked acrobatics because I wanted an extra edge while sneaking through those dungeons, jumping to different vantage points and covering more ground over a quicker period of time. Blunt is for my melee takedowns, and I picked it to get a different experience from what I'm used to. Light armor is a far cry off from heavy armor, but I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. Its design, its lighter weight, and its ability to allow my character to move around more freely. Marksman was for ranged takedowns. I tried a stealth archer build not too long ago and loved it. It's something I've been wanting more of ever since. Maybe not to the full extent of solely relying on a bow, but enough to get the job done. Mercantile was an interesting pick. I thought I was going to be doing a lot more buying and selling in my short time. Needless to say, that didn't really happen. If I could go back, I'd probably switch it out for destruction, as my Magicka bar isn't getting any other use. Plus, I'm just thinking now of how awesome a spellcaster assassin build would have been. Up next, you have security. This was chosen for an easier time with locked doors and chests. If you've watched my previous video, you know that I struggled a lot in that department. Finally, there's sneak. You can't be a stealthy character without the stealth-based skill itself. Well, maybe it could, but it'd be really hard. After Vilverin, I still had the exploration bug. I wanted to keep on discovering the deepest, darkest places of this new Cyrodiil. So I thought to myself, why not just settle for the fort next door? Fort Ursurek is a goblin dungeon that I've entered only a handful of times. It's not really super exciting, and it doesn't offer much in the way of valuable loot, at least at level 1. However, with the remaster, I didn't feel that way. It was like I was adventuring through a brand new dungeon for the very first time. My bearings were off, I forgot where the enemies were placed, and honestly, the layout was different to what I'd remembered. That's probably just a me thing though. Crawling through the fort, silently taking out the creatures, checking my corners, it was a whole new experience and I loved it. I was actively excited to move on to the next dungeon, reliving what I was already used to, just from a different perspective. However, I knew that I was doing myself a disservice if I didn't go out and find myself a better weapon. There are plenty out there that you can snag at level 1, and they'll set you leagues ahead of your opponents. So for this, I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and went on to tackle the Udafric Matron. I've made a short about it, and I'm pretty sure I even included it in a video. But the Udafric Matron is as urban legend-like as you can get in this game. It's an unmarked quest, it's tricky to find, and involves taking on a beast like no other. If you manage to beat the unique troll, you're awarded with the Frostworm Bow, an enchanted bow that deals 15 points of frost damage per strike. However, the first thing I had to do in order to even get near the thing was find Dive Rock. Look, I'm pretty good with directions and bearings in games, but the Geralt and Valis mountain range have never been my strong suit. Combine that with the all new look, updated textures, and character movements, I kid you not, I was lost for over 20 minutes trying to find it. I struggled getting to the peaks, and what's more, Dive Rock was in a completely different place than where I thought. It's certainly a lot trickier to spot now than it was with the original Oblivion's smoothed out mountains. In any case, once I found the matron, I was able to get a few pot shots off on her before I went barreling in for the combat. Her health was going down incredibly slow, and if not for the steep slopes, I think I would have lost this battle over and over again. However, the emotions that were brought up from the challenge, the fear, and the cheese were unlike any that I've gotten to experience in Oblivion for quite some time. Once she was beaten, I looted the Frostworm bow, and then was free to continue my adventures. Deciding to stay on the questing path though, I've been itching to play through Caught in the Hunt again. It's actually a really interesting quest that I think gets frequently overlooked. The plot involves deception and survival. There's a pretty great twist towards the end, plus it's a great opportunity for stealth-based characters to thrive. Now, I believe I encountered a common bug with this quest, one that I'm pretty sure didn't exist in the original game. Upon arriving at Fort Grief, the lever you need to activate in order to gain entry was missing. I thought I was going crazy at first. I looked all over the gate area, up and down the island, the back and the front of the fort, and it was still nowhere to be found. I thought for sure Virtuous moved it somewhere else, or that I had just simply forgotten its location. It turns out this was a really common thing encountered by other players, and the solution was to exit the game and reload back in. It worked like a charm, and I was off to rescuing Alaron Locke. Crawling through the innards of Fort Grief, I felt that excitement hit me again. It was like this mission had all new stakes, and killing the hunters carried more weight than it ever did before. Stealthily taking down the NPCs had my adrenaline pumping. The gas traps got me good, and I even forgot one of the hunters was a Nord, so of course my frostbow was rendered useless. I got clobbered, and I didn't mind. It was all part of the new experience. Once the hunter's run was completed, I left the dungeon and witnessed Círdan kill Alaron, the twist of a century. The final fight here was pretty simple though. In fact, killing Dragol and his assistant was even easier than some of the hunters I had to face. To wrap up my time with the new playthrough, I went ahead and did a quest I'd only ever completed once before, and it was for a video here on this channel. Before doing so though, I popped my head into my favorite chapel, if only just to say hello to its new residents. Arriving at the Imperial Bridge Inn, I spoke with Lithnilian and he tasked me with grabbing his research notes. No stone unturned has always flew under my radar, and even after making a video about it, I still find it to be very forgettable. So, in order to give it the love it deserves and to close out this build, I ventured on over to Bramble Point Cave and began my expedition. Overall, in the year 2025 and with the Oblivion remake having just been released, I think my focus would be put on doing things I haven't really done before. Trying out new builds, and acquiring unique weapons and armor for skill sets I haven't had the chance to get familiar with. Things like blunt, marksman, and even blades like daggers. Magicka is probably the most unexplored area for me. I've never really touched mysticism or alteration. For illusion, conjuration, and restoration, I've only really scratched the surface. I once had a whole playthrough dedicated to the School of Destruction, but I'm sure there was plenty I overlooked. I wasn't kidding when I said I'd love to make a spellcaster assassin build. Sneaking around while relying on your magical arsenal sounds like a really fun time. Conjuring up weapons, firing off destruction magic, using specific utility-based spells, I'm sold. How I could turn that into a video for you all is something I'd have to work out still, but I think it's possible. The answer to the original question, what does your starting build look like, is simple. It looks different every time. At least, that's what I want it to be. Again, I'd love to know what your current Oblivion remastered builds are down below, and until next time, keep on adventuring.